That's not loud. There. Good afternoon and welcome to the June 12th, 2025 regular meeting of the Finance and Risk Management Committee. Happy 127th Philippine Independence Day. Today is it. I am Dita Yamani, Chair of the FMRC representing the City of National City. We welcome members of the public, community, power staff, and committee members joining us in person at the Port of San Diego, okay, thank you, Administrative Building. I now call the FMRC meeting to order. Ms. Sandra, please call the roll.
Director Insunza,
I'm here.
Vice Chair Suzuki,
Present.
Chair Yamani.
Okay.
We have a quorum, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Let us turn and face the flag for the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilmember Insunza, please lead it.
Put your right hand on your heart, stand if you can. Pledge allegiance.
The United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks, sir. Madam CEO, are there any items to be added, withdrawn, or reordered on the agenda?
There are not.
Thank you. Non-agenda public comments. We will now take up non-agenda public comments. Any written public comments submitted before the FMRC meeting were emailed to committee members prior to the meeting and will be posted on the website. Ms. Sandra, do we have any non-agenda public comments?
We do have a member of the public who wishes to speak. Scott Andrews, can you please approach the podium? You have 3 minutes.
Please identify yourself, sir.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Scott Andrews, President and CEO of Neighborhood National Bank. Pleased to speak to the committee. And I wanted to speak today and state my appreciation to CEO Burns and CFO Washington, who recently held a meeting with Neighborhood National Bank to discuss the opportunity as we've appeared before the committee previously regarding deposits of San Diego Community Power that may be placed with Neighborhood National Bank. So I really want to express my appreciation to CEO Burns, CFO Washington, and indicate our interest in continuing those discussions. I would also just like to remind the committee that all those deposits gathered or placed with Neighborhood would be put back to work in the local community. We are a CDFI, the only community development financial institution in the county. We make currently this year about 78% of our loans in low moderate income communities. And these deposits that you would place with us would be recycled back into the community in the form of loans, grants, and charitable contributions, primarily in low moderate income communities. So appreciate the time the CEO and the CFO have provided us and look forward to continuing those discussions. Thank you, Madam Chair, members.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for coming to before us. Thank you. We will now move on to the consent calendar. Item number 1, approve March 2025 meeting minutes. Do any committee members wish to pull the consent calendar item? Ms. Sandra, do we have any public comment on the consent calendar?
We do not, Madam Chair.
Directors?
Move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any other comments? Seeing none, Ms. Sandra, please. Oops, I have to take public comment. You said there's none.
There are none.
Okay, so we got to take the roll.
Yes. Director Insunza,
Yes.
Vice Chair Suzuki,
Yes.
Chair Yamani.
Aye.
Motion carries, Madam Chair.
Oh, there it was. We will now move on to our regular agenda. Item number 2, Treasurer's Report for period ending April 30 of 2025. I'll turn over to Dr. Eric Washington, our Chief Financial Officer Treasurer, to present this item.
Thank you.
Do I have to call if there's any comment? Public comment? There's none. Okay, Dr.
None.
Washington, it's your turn, sir.
My apology, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, directors. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Dr. Eric Washington, Chief Financial Officer, Treasurer for San Diego Community Power, as stated. I'm presenting item 2, recommendation to receive and file the Treasurer's Report for the year-to-date financial fiscal year period ending April 30th, 2025. So I'm happy to report that when we compare our actual results to the amended budget from fiscal year 2025 year to date, net operating revenues for the most part are in line with what we budgeted for, with just a slight difference of 0.1%. Net revenues were under compared to what was budgeted for. I'm happy also to report that operating expenses came in 2% lower than budgeted for, and that's contributed primarily due to the change in the market as it relates to energy costs. So we ended the period with a change in net position, said differently, a contribution to our reserve bill year to date at just under $24 million. And that's demonstrated also in the bar chart in this slide, as well as the table in this slide in the upper right-hand corner. So we can move on to the next slide, please. So this slide is a slide we often refer to as our finance dashboard. We ended the period, as stated, with a contribution to reserves of just under 24 million. Total access to liquidity year to date, we landed at 535 million, of which 323 million was a representation of actual cash that we have access to. And then that is supplemented or undergirded by the $212 million we have access to under our revolving line of credit currently held at JP Morgan Chase Bank. We had no outstanding debt. That trend continues. Also, in terms of our reserve build at the end of the year-to-date period, we were, based on cash, we were up to 56% of our reserve target. Next slide, please. This slide shows the trajectory of our reserves over the past 12, 13 months. And as you can see, the reserve build sort of ebbs and flows throughout the year based on where we are in our seasonality as it relates to rates. We ended the period with days cash on hand of 167 days. Just as a reminder, our target is 167 days access to liquidity. And our days cash on hand, we landed at 100 days. And again, as a reminder, our target is 180 days. Next slide, please. This is a metric that we continue to track, and I'm happy to report that we're still maintaining a participation rate of over 95% on average when we take a look at all of our jurisdictions. And this slide also breaks the participation rates down by our member agencies, both in the bar chart as well as the table beneath the bar illustration. So that concludes my report, Madam Chair. I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Washington. Mari, what are we doing next?
There are no public comment.
Report?
There are none.
There's no other comments or anything. So I have to,
Receive and file.
directors, any comment on the director, on the treasurer's report? Are there any committee member comments? Questions on item number 2? Oh, this is a receive and file. See, I should read, Madam CEO. So, sorry, this is a receive and file treasurer's report for period ending April 30, 2025.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Washington. We'll now go to item number 3. Recommend board approval of update to San Diego Community Power's energy risk management policy, California carbon allowance and carbon offset transactions and obligations. Janine Camara, Director of Portfolio Management, will present this item. Sandra, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not, Madam Chair.
Okay, Ms. Janine. Hi.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair Yamani, FRMC members. I'm Janine Camara and your Director of Portfolio Management. I'm here to ask the FRMC to recommend to the Board of Directors approve and adopt Resolution 2025-5, approving the update to Community Power's energy risk management in regard to carbon allowance and carbon offset transactions, and authorize the CEO to approve procurement to meet our obligations under the California Cap and Trade Program. So the goal of bringing this addendum forward is to ensure Community Power is able to meet our compliance obligations under the state's Cap and Trade Program. Approval of the addendum will update our energy risk management policy to allow the CEO to approve procurement of carbon allowance and carbon offset products available in quarterly auctions and in secondary markets. To give some quick background on Cap and Trade, the program was launched in 2013. It's a key element of California's strategy to reduce GHG emissions across the state. It sets a total limit on emissions allowed in the state and has declining amounts every year to help reduce the amount of GHG throughout our state. The program's also designed to have increasing prices year over year and create the economic incentive to invest in cleaner technologies and more efficient technologies. So also under Cap and Trade, electric importers such as Community Power have a compliance obligation to purchase carbon allowances or offsets to meet GHG emissions that are associated with the imported electricity. While this addendum is required to allow Community Power to meet our compliance obligations, it also establishes our approach and limits when it comes to carbon products. Mainly that Community Power will consider the cost of carbon, renewable priorities, and our overall benefit to ratepayers when we're evaluating the use of energy imports to meet our power supply needs or resource adequacy requirements. And carbon allowances are available for trade in CARB's quarterly auctions and secondary carbon markets. Community Power will only acquire carbon allowances or offsets to meet our forecasted obligations, and consistent with energy risk management policies, this prohibits speculative positions or trading. The addendum also includes volumetric and notional transaction limits. Individual transactions will not exceed 20,000 allowances to cover 20,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalent, or will be no greater than $1 million. And that is the conclusion of my item. I am happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Janine. Are there any committee member comments, questions on this item number 3? Directors? No? Okay, I think, this is a compliance issue and it is already included in our budget, so it's just a matter of us approving it for recommendation.
That's correct.
Huh?
We're recommending that the board approve.
Move for recommendation.
Oh, okay, there is a motion for recommendation to recommend board adoption of resolution number 2025-05, approving addendum 2 to San Diego Community Power's energy risk management policy, California carbon allowance and carbon offset transactions and obligations, and authorize the CEO to approve procurement of California carbon allowance CCA and carbon offset CO to meet San Diego Community Power compliance obligations under California's Cap and Trade Program. I have a motion.
Second.
And a second. If there's no other comment, Ms. Sandra, please call the roll.
Director Insunza,
Yes.
Vice Chair Suzuki,
Aye.
Chair Yamani.
Aye.
Motion
Thank you,
carries,
Ms.
Madam Chair.
Janine. Thank you so much. We'll now go to item number 4, which is tariffs, tax credits, and executive orders, new build market outlook update from Janine Kamara again. Director, no? Oh, Patrick. Oh, both. Okay, so Patrick, I know you were there yesterday for my briefing, so go ahead. Ms. Sandra, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not, Madam Chair.
No other items. So let's hear from Patrick Wells, Associate Director of Legislative Affairs, will present this item. And Ms. Janine Kamar, Director of Portfolio Management.
Good, okay.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you, board members. Joint presentation between myself and Janine. We wanted to give you a snapshot as we see federal policy changes and then how that may be impacting the energy procurement portfolio, especially as you are considering the budget moving forward. So today I will cover 2 areas of federal policy development and then turn it over to Janine to talk about some tariff updates and also an outlook for the energy procurement portfolio. And just want to emphasize up front, there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of moving parts. So this is definitely just a snapshot in time, and there are a lot of outcomes that are far from uncertain right now. So first up, out of the 2 items that I'll present on is Congress. Currently, Congress is considering a budget reconciliation bill. The House on May 22nd passed and approved H.R. 1, which is officially called the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. This is the reconciliation process is a process where the Congress can make changes related to the federal budget and tax changes. And they are, in passing this bill, they are attempting to extend the 2017 Tax Act and the 2017 Jobs and Tax Act. And in order to do that, they need to find what are called pay-fors, or they need to find other program areas that they can reduce spending so that they can create federal budget room for extending those tax cuts. Next slide, please. So just by way of background and why this is relevant to community power, under current law, there are 2 primary tax credits that are available to utility scale projects. So solar, wind, batteries, geothermal. They are called the investment and production tax credits. They're quite complex, but at a high level, they provide about a 30% tax credit. The taxpayer or the developer is actually the one that captures those the value of that credit and then passes that on through the price in a power purchase agreement. Again, it's available for all clean energy technologies. They are considered technology neutral tax credits. And what's really important is that they sunset in 2032 or when greenhouse gas emissions fall 25% below 2022 levels for the electric sector. The electric sector is not expected to hit that threshold. So it is anticipated that the ITC and PTC under current law would continue beyond for a number of years, 2032. The current law also, you are able to capture those tax credits when you start construction of a project, and that will become important in just a moment when I talk about the changes that are included in H.R. 1. So let's turn to that. So H.R. 1 includes a new sunset where you have to begin construction 60 days after the bill would be passed, and the project would have to be placed into service by the end of 2028. So you can see that's a pretty big shift from current law of starting construction, and you have those tax credits available to you probably well into the 2030s. Now you would have to make sure that your project is placed into service by the end of 2028. So a pretty significant tightening of the tax credit window. There is also in the bill included what are called foreign entity of concern restrictions. Again, very, very complex, but bottom line is a project could not receive material assistance from one of 4 countries, China, North Korea, Russia, and Iran. That is including component parts of projects. That's going to be really important, especially Janine will touch on this during the tariff portion. A lot of component parts for renewable energy projects come from China. So these 2 provisions together, really this new placed into service standard, the 2028 date, and the foreign entity of concern, really restrict the viability of these tax credits if this bill were to pass. Next slide, please. Want to take a quick detour briefly just for your awareness. We're focusing this presentation really on utility scale tax credits, but it is important to note that this bill, if passed, would also end at the end of 2025, 3 consumer tax credits, one that provides a 30% tax credit for homeowners to invest in solar and storage, another that provides a tax credit for homeowners to electrify and improve their homes from an energy efficiency perspective, and another that reduces the cost of electric vehicles. Those would cease to end at the end of this year if this bill passes. That's important because those financial incentives are important to our deep decarbonization goals and our virtual power plant. Essentially, removing these tax credits would make it more expensive for residents in San Diego to invest in those types of technologies. Next slide, please. There are 2 other competing bills bringing us back to utility scale project perspective. There are 2 competing proposals. One is called the Ending Intermittent Energy Act. It would focus really on ending those ITC, the PTC, the tax credits for solar and wind only, and more of a phase down approach. And the second is the Certainty for Our Energy Future Act. That would allow the ITC and PTC to wind down in 2031. It would importantly maintain the start of construction standard and include a safe harbor provision for projects that are already contracted for. It would then maintain those tax credits into the 2030 for other technologies, geothermal, energy storage. So from our vantage point, we think HR 3291 is certainly the most advantageous. We're not clear on whether these bills will be ultimately in the mix of what finally Congress chooses to pass this session. Next slide, please. So timeline and next steps, HR 1 is currently with the Senate. They are anticipating that they may try to approve a version of HR 1 by July 4th. That is kind of their self-imposed deadline. They could make changes by it, in which case they would have to send it back to the House for them to vote on it again. It's a very fluid situation. There may or may not be public hearings in the Senate on the legislation. We are continuing to monitor it using all the resources we have, including our National Trade Association and also our federal consultants, and continuing to communicate with our congressional delegation. So that wraps up my portion on, oh, excuse me, I have one other slide, so please, next slide, please. Want to mention one thing that does wrap up my portion on HR 1 and the tax credit. There is another issue wanted to raise to your attention, that when this administration took office, they did issue a number of energy executive orders. One of them, called the Unleashing American Energy Executive Order, caused a delay in renewable energy permitting on Bureau of Land Management lands. And that is relevant because we do have one project, as you may recall from the prior board meeting, on Bureau of Land Management land in Nevada, in Clark County, Nevada. So just wanted to highlight that there was a pause on permitting for renewable energy. The board did approve an extension of that contract for that particular project. It is our understanding that BLM has since lifted that pause and is proceeding forward with permitting renewable energy. They have permitted a solar project in Arizona, which is a good sign. And we understand from our developer partner that they are in conversations about moving the environmental report forward on the particular project that we have contracted for. So wanted to make sure that that was part of the discussion in terms of what's going on at the federal level with respect to SCCP's procurement portfolio. And with that, that ends my portion of it. And happy to pass it over to Jeannie now.
Well, great. Thank you, Patrick. I'm Janine, Director of Portfolio Management, and I'm going to share a little bit on the tariff impacts to Community Power's developing power supply portfolio. So generally speaking, interpreting tariff policy and quantifying the direct and indirect economic impacts of these tariffs is complex and a challenge for impacted industries. So I'm going to go over a high-level summary of where we're at with the information today. Tariffs are not new. They've been used in various degrees over the decades. For example, the U.S. imposed significant tariffs on China during the first Trump administration, the Biden administration, and the second Trump administration. Since January of this year, the U.S. has applied additional tariffs to nations across the globe. These tariffs and corresponding retaliatory tariffs have become extremely volatile and are posing a challenge for all industries in how to respond, including renewable energy. So currently, 10% is the baseline tariff applied to all countries, with country specific tariffs in addition. China does remain a dominant supplier of raw materials utilized in solar equipment. However, increasingly, the PV supply chain has shifted to other Southeast Asian countries such as Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, Cambodia, as well as to South Korea, India, and the US. Steep tariffs have been imposed on aluminum and steel, the latest being about 50%, which can also increase capital costs not only for renewable energy construction, but across other construction sectors as well. Next slide. On May 28th, the U.S. Court of International Trade froze the sweeping tariffs on the basis that the administration improperly used the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977. However, since then, a federal appeals court has allowed the most sweeping tariffs to remain while it reviews the lower court decision. My next couple of slides highlight the recent tariff history with China and some high-level information on their market share of the supply chain of renewable energy infrastructure. Next slide. All right. Here's a chart that shows the volatility of tariffs over the last 3 administrations, and included, you can see the most recent volatility. Since the recent Liberation Day on April 2nd, the highest tariff level imposed to date is 145%, which was on April 9th, briefly, and have since settled under a 90-day pause to about 30%. The outcome of this pause is in the trade war is not known at this time. Next slide. The supply of raw materials and components for battery energy storage. Next slide. So the supply of raw material components for battery energy storage has not yet diversified to the extent PV module supply has. So materials like graphite, cobalt, as well as BESS component manufacturing are supplied by China. And there's multiple points in the BESS supply chain that are also supplied by China. For example, even a battery energy storage system supplied by a US manufacturer may include solar battery cells supplied by China. Even to a lesser extent, China is also the supplier of wind turbines, generators, and other high voltage equipment. And next slide. Fortunately for Community Power, we do remain well positioned to meet our interim targets of 75% renewable energy by 2027, with nearly 10 years still to go to meet our goal of 100% by 2035. And this is because all but 2 of our utility renewable projects under development have either commenced construction or have safe harbored equipment and are currently on track to commence operations by the end of 2028. So meaning approximately 2/3 of our developing portfolio have mitigated much of the recent tariff risk, as well as potential decreases to the tax credit eligibility. That means there remains roughly 1/3 of our developing renewable power supply that are still more exposed to the risk of either increased tariffs or loss of tax credits. We're monitoring these projects closely to understand the impacts to contract viability. Further, in our current pipeline, wherever possible, Community Power is prioritizing projects that are better positioned to mitigate tariff exposure due to developer-specific procurement and project financing strategies. Unfortunately, impacts from the loss of these tax credits may not be avoidable for some of these earlier stage projects. We will keep the FRMC informed after the budget reconciliation bill, in whatever form it takes, is enacted into law. And that wraps up, I think, my presentation or slides.
Share your microphone.
Happy to answer any questions should the FRMC have any.
Thank you, Patrick and Janine. Thank you so much for the report. Are there any member of the committee have comments or anything? This is a receive and file item. So the recommendation is to receive and file the community power staff status report on federal policy and budget as it relates to clean energy procurement. So we will receive and file this. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Director. We'll now go to item number 5, AB 2561, status of vacancies, recruitment and retention efforts. This will be presented by Ms. Chandra Pugh, Senior Director of People Operations and Administration, will present this item. Sandra, do we have any public comment on this item?
There are none, Madam Chair.
There are no other comments, Ms. Chandra.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. I am pleased to present on the status of our vacancies, our recruitment efforts, and our retention efforts. My name is Chandra Pugh. I'm the Director of People Operations and Administrative Services. Just a little background on why I'm presenting today. Assembly Bill AB 2561 amended You hear me? Okay. Amended the Brown Act, which created a new obligation for public agencies to present on the status of vacancies, recruitment, and retention efforts. This new law took effect on January 1st, 2025, and applies to all public agencies. Next slide, please. There are a few requirements that I'm going to be presenting to you today. One of those is the status of our vacancies, our recruitment and retention efforts, and findings, and also make any recommendations, if needed, to our recruitment and retention efforts. So for fiscal year 2024-2025, we had 31 vacancies, which have been filled. There's actually 3 here that are open positions. Our chief commercial officer, our community outreach representative, and our senior origination associate remain open at this time. Next slide. So to our findings. Community Power did encounter difficulties in filling a few positions. This is normal. We had difficulty filling our rate analyst position and our origination manager positions due to specification of these roles. Some candidates that applied did not meet our role requirements, which resulted in a limited qualified applicant pool at the time. So when that happens, and that can happen, Human Resources will maybe recommend a slight tweak to the job description, and or maybe looking at some of our salary requirements for those roles. When we do that, we're looking at clearly at alignment, but we're looking at potentially title changes and moving folks up and down the salary band, or moving that job up and down the salary band. And that works a lot of times. So we typically make those changes, then we repost, and then we get a wider and broader applicant pool. It means we have to start over sometimes, but it's worth the effort because we're really wanting to make sure we have the right position, right folks in these positions. All right, so next slide, please. And here in this table, you will see our positions, the departments that they were requested under are, let's see, when those positions were posted, and then the status or the reason for the vacancy, if in fact those vacancies are occurring. At the very bottom, you'll see the final 3 jobs are the ones that I was mentioning, that actually we ended up not posting, and that was really a hiring manager decision, and it really is also just based on priorities of the business unit and for the organization at that time. So we want to be very careful in how we're hiring, and so sometimes that means that positions won't be posted right away. All right, next slide. So I'm going to talk about this slide, but I also want to mention a little bit about our recruitment and retention efforts. It's very important for us to not only be recruiting top talent in the community, but retain top talent. And so one of the challenges for any human resources department is to just ensure that we are remaining a great place to work, right? And so there's many aspects of that. But I wanted to just tell you a little bit about our interview process in general, just to give you an idea. So our recruitment process includes 3 interview stages, including a virtual stage and then 2 in-person panel interviews. At the end of the recruitment process, Human Resources also deploys a candidate engagement survey so that our candidates can provide feedback to us. So it's important to us that we have a stellar reputation in the community, and often our positions are word of mouth. And so when we have candidates coming and applying for these roles, we want to make sure that they have a very good candidate experience. So that's the slide that you're seeing there. So we oftentimes launch the survey to our candidates, and then I'm very proud to say that we got really great feedback. So most of the responses you'll see there were strongly agree, or neutral. We did have one response there that we are following closely, and that's related to the challenges that candidates are saying that they're experiencing with our process. And what that means, because we called these folks, and what that means is that we wanted to, they thought the panel process was a little bit overwhelming. And what that meant was that we had quite a few panelists. So the standard is typically 3, but we do have a cross-functional organization, and there's quite a bit of cross-collaboration. And so oftentimes there may be additional panelists to that standard 3. But we're keeping track of that. And we let our hiring managers know what best practice is. And we also let our executive team know what that feedback was. And so we'll watch the trend, and we'll see if we can make any improvements in that area. Great. So that concludes my presentation.
Thanks. Thank you, Ms. Chandra. Are there any committee members to any comments from my directors? This is a receive and file item as well. No, this is not a receive and file. Sorry, Ruby looked at me. No, this is not a receive and file. This is a recommendation. This is to recommend to the board to hold a public hearing, receive comments, and accept a report on the status of community power employee vacancy rates and recruitment and retention efforts. Do we open for public?
We
do
did
open
in the
for,
beginning, but there are no public comments.
There's no public comment. See, it's a place to work. And directors, any comment?
No, I'll make the motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Director Suzuki and second by Director Inzunza. If there are no other comments, Ms. Sandra, please call the vote.
Director Insunza,
Yes.
Vice Chair Suzuki,
Aye.
Chair Yamani,
Aye.
motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chandra. Thank you so much. Thank you for that report. We are now going to item number 6. Recommend to the board approval of FY 25-26 operating budget, FY 25-26 capital budget, and FY 26 to 2030 capital investment plan. I'll turn it over to our CEO, Karen Burns, to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, council members. The San Diego Community Power fiscal year 2026 proposed budget is aimed to shape a future that is both sustainable and equitable. While you saw a high-level overview of the budget at last board meeting, we wanted to provide the FRMC with an in-depth look at how affordability and providing long-term value remain central to our strategy. Every decision we make, from purchasing power to expanding programs, is grounded in the needs of our customers and our communities. We understand that it is important for us to think about our budget the way our customers think about theirs. While our customer needs are as diverse as they are, they all share the desire for government agencies like ours to lower costs and utilize their hard-earned dollars that they pay for our service to be used effectively and efficiently. So this proposed budget reflects our priorities: stable competitive rates, customer-centered services, expanding programs and incentives, capital investment planning, organizational enhancements, and fiscal sustainability. Every choice in this budget is intentional. It has been made with enormous care and consideration from the subject matter experts across our smart, talented staff of public servants. They are here today to talk about their proposed budgets and how they center on providing the best value possible for our ratepayers. I will now turn it over to our Chief Financial Officer, Eric Washington.
Thank you very much, Karen. Again, for the record, Dr. Eric Washington, Chief Financial Officer, Treasurer at San Diego Community Power. Thank you, Madam Chair and Directors. As Karen stated, we have 5 guiding principles that prioritize our approach to budget setting. The slide that's presented to you now is just a reminder by way of background, the budget development process that's been board approved that we've consistently used in the past. So we start in February, and there's a series of activities that take place in shaping the budget, landing where we are today at the Finance and Risk Management Committee meeting. Next slide, please. So as I stated, we have 5 guiding principles that prioritize the development of our budget, starting with fiscal responsibility. In an effort to achieve financial stability, we need to make sure that we are making the right budget decisions at the right level to ensure short-term as well as long-term success, pointing to an overall stable agency, as Karen pointed out, not only for today, but for decades to come. Ensuring that we have sufficient funding to continue to operate year over year, being aware of the risks that we have to face, including market volatility, rate setting, prioritizing affordability for our customers, building reserves, making sure that we have reserves that creates opportunities for us to, at some point in the future, make decisions to stabilize our rates, ensuring transparency. So our budget development plays out in a public setting across several public meetings, including meetings such as the Finance and Risk Management Committee meeting, our board meetings, as well as presentations in our Community Advisory Committee meetings, making sure that the public has an opportunity to weigh in and are fully aware of how we develop our budget. That also includes informing the board and the organization of our financial condition or our financial position via the treasurer's report that gets reported out to this committee and informed to the board on a monthly basis. Next slide, please. So just wanted to take a brief moment prior to passing the presentation over to Tim Manglamott, our Director of Finance. So again, pointing to fiscal responsibility, continuing to work toward our reserve bill for long-term stability, making sure that we are strong financially, organizational stability, strengthening our internal capacity and supporting long-term strategy and service delivery, stable competitive rates, maintaining affordability through disciplined operation, long-term procurement, and financial oversight. Programs and incentives, making sure that we can support scaling of various programs, which you'll hear more about in presentations to come, as well as making sure that we can move forward our capital investment plan to guide infrastructure development and ensuring transparency. Next slide, please. So I will pass it over to Tim Manglamott, our Director of Finance, to continue the conversation. to continue the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Good afternoon, Chair Yamani, Director Suzuki, and Director Nzinza. My name is Timothy Mangelmont, for the record, Director of Finance. I have the opportunity today to continue here the budget presentation. Before I get into it, I want to take a quick moment just to thank staff and all of my colleagues in the crowd who put a lot of work and effort into this budget. And the bulk of the presentation from here on out is going to be the department presentation, where you'll see a lot of the details that are going into the budget. The slide that you see in front of you is your standard eye chart that we show in every budget presentation. When you look at the changes from last month to this month, from the May board meeting to the FRMC meeting, you'll notice that there isn't any changes on the operating side. Most of the changes, actually all the changes that you'll see from last month's operating budget, NCAP, and capital budget versus this month are updates that you'll see to the capital budget and to the CAP or capital improvement plan. But mainly what happens between month to month is on the capital side or the CAP, it's a continuing fund. And so from what you'll see from your jurisdictions, it just means it's capital projects that span multiple years. And so whatever funding you don't use during the end of that year, it carries over multiple years. And so as we go from month to month, especially as we have more updated numbers through presentations that you see, such as through the Treasurer's report, we have more calibrated figures on what we have in terms of remaining balances on the capital budget. And so that's where you see most of the updates in the capital budget. And so what you'll notice as part of your packets are two full books that show the detail of what you see on the operating budget in the CAP. In those books, when you see those red line figures, a lot of those red lines have to do with those updates that you see on the capital side. As we get more updated numbers and as we get more color and on the remaining balances for those capital budgets. The other change that you'll see on the capital side is you'll notice that on the 5-year CIP, we're proposing changes to what we contribute on the operating budget into the CIP. I will note the CIP is a 5-year plan, so there's a difference between the operating budget, the capital budget, and the 5-year CIP. The action that we'll ask you to take at the June board meeting is an appropriation of the operating budget, an appropriation for the capital budget, but the 5-year CIP is a capital plan. So that means that the 5-year CIP plan in which we plan to spend funding over the course of the next 5 years, but there's no actual appropriation action that you're taking for the 5-year CIP. So the bulk of the changes that you'll see have to do with that 5-year CIP, and most of it has to do with us trying to sustain levels of operating contributions into the CIP. And those red lines that you'll see in your budget books kind of reflect that. Next slide. So kind of what I mentioned earlier, on the operating side, which are going to be those blue boxes there you see at the top, that reflects the kind of major budget categories for professional services, personnel, marketing and outreach, and general and administration costs. There isn't any change from last month to this month. So what you see up there is the same presentation and numbers that we showed last month. Again, there's no change to the operating side. As I mentioned previously, we did recalibrate our capital transfer as we get more color into what remaining balances we have on the capital projects, especially with programs. And so you do see a slightly revised figure on what we're contributing from the operating side to the capital side. And that's that dark gray box at the bottom. Next slide. So kind of transitioning here a little bit, this is kind of getting into the department presentation so we can get into the details on what we're actually delivering with the budgets. I'm going to start out here with the finance department, then I'm going to turn over to my colleagues who will get into details on their respective departments. But on the finance side, what are you seeing in this year's budget? I'll start out with affordability. So my other colleague, Judge Spengler, will present on the clean prepayment transactions here pretty shortly. But affordability is a constant theme throughout the budget, but in particular within the finance department. So we do plan to do more clean prepayment transactions in this year's budget. Each clean prepayment transaction leads to anywhere between $3 to $6 million in just annual savings. I think the last clean prepaid transaction we did was a $6.8 million annual savings. We hope to do more of these, and it's a theme that we hope to continue in this year's budget and in later budgets. Another big thing that we're trying to build is our middle office risk function. So you just heard a presentation from Patrick and from Janine earlier, kind of on the regulatory and legislative landscape. The middle office risk function really is a function that looks at that changing regulatory and legislative landscape, looks at ever-changing energy costs, and kind of puts agency control on those costs. And so it's a function that we hope to get stronger in this upcoming fiscal year. And it's kind of the reason why, if you look to the two positions that we're trying to add for this fiscal year, one of those positions is around the risk function that I just mentioned earlier. And the second position that we're proposing in this year's budget is additional support for programs, as my colleague Colin's going to present here pretty soon. As our programs continue to expand, we hope to continue to grow our support functions in lockstep so we have proper support for those programs. And the last thing I'll mention is we're hoping to get an enterprise resource planning system. So it's funny to say this, SCCP has only been around for a few years, 6 years now. We don't yet have a budgeting system. A lot of what we do in terms of budgeting happens in Excel. And so we're hoping to evolve the agency, at least from a budgeting perspective, and kind of level up our budgeting prowess through this enterprise resource planning system. So in terms of finance, that's kind of what we're hoping to deliver in this year's budget from the finance department. And with that, I'm going to turn over to my other colleagues to present on their departments. Thank you.
Hello again. I'm Janine Kamara, Director of Portfolio Management and part of the Power Services team. So purchasing power supply on behalf of community power customers does have the largest impact on the budget. We work to provide customers with clean, reliable, and competitively priced electricity. Power Services does this through long-term and short-term energy contracting, accurate load forecasting, power resource scheduling, wholesale market participation, active energy risk management, and ongoing compliance with state regulatory mandates. Some key highlights in our budget this year include adjusting assumptions to manage risk and account as best as possible for wholesale market fluctuations, adding a portfolio analyst and a modeling and forecasting analyst to prudently manage our power supply position and continue to work us towards our renewable energy goals while remaining affordable. Continuing to ensure cost-effective compliance with resource adequacy, or RA, and renewable portfolio standards, or RPS. We're implementing and integrating an energy trading risk management system to improve internal analytics, risk tracking, and reporting by Q3 2025. We're getting additional Solar Advantage contracts in place that will provide significant bill relief for nearly 10,000 income qualified families, while also shoring up resiliency to meet our local procurement goals. Managing and maintaining a diverse power supply portfolio that helps stabilize prices and protect customers from any extreme cost fluctuations. And then I think I'm turning it over to Jack.
Thank you, Janine. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of our committee. My name is Jack Clark. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at Community Power. The operations section includes the 4 departments you see here on your slide: IT, data analytics, customer operations as one, legislative and regulatory affairs, customer programs, and public affairs. We've also, over recent months, added a project management office. The operations section of Community Power ensures that the organization at large functions effectively and efficiently across all departments. We typically drive the implementation of the agency's strategic objectives through internal coordination, collaboration, and operational excellence. The team oversees internal governance, agency-wide administrative systems, and policy development. Operations is also responsible for engagement with our customers and stakeholders at all levels, including the Community Advisory Committee, among many other groups. Which means we hear from our customers on a regular basis and work to tailor our collective efforts to meet their needs. This includes our work to ensure transparency and accountability. The Project Management Office, as I mentioned, is housed within operations, was created this past year, and leads efforts to align project execution with strategic priorities, standardization of workflows, requirements, create efficiencies, and improve internal delivery. Operational efficiency supports affordability by reducing redundancies and ensures customer dollars are used as effectively as possible. We're largely holding steady on our budgets this year, but are proposing some key investments to enhance customer education and launch programs that you've been made aware of in terms of development for several years now. Next slide, please. We'll begin to move into each one of the departments in operations. I'll cover IT, data analytics, and customer operations on behalf of Lucas Uto, who's not with us today. This department serves two distinct functions that have been broken up in the budget book as IT and data analytics as the first section and customer operations as the second section. Both functions work together to provide reliable, data-driven tools to our internal staff and to our customers. The budget highlights for our department here include investments to strengthen cybersecurity and streamline our internal IT functions to ensure that our organization remains secure and efficient. We are hoping to launch, we are launching an enterprise-wide data platform that will centralize our data and help our internal teams better collaborate to provide effective and improved service to our customers. We're also seeking to advance processes across all internal departments to align agency systems and optimize internal procedures. As you can imagine, we're a young organization. We've got a lot of integration and internal procedures to really optimize at this time. On the customer operations side of the house, we're aiming to resolve outstanding billing and communications issues with SDG&E that affect customer satisfaction. We're also looking to increase our support at our contact center, including updated training and performance monitoring for high-quality service and to ensure customers know their options in terms of how to get cleaner and cheaper power. This department is also working very closely with a number of other departments internally, including, perhaps most importantly, public affairs. This means that both teams are working to expand marketing and outreach of our lowest priced power-based rate option, as well as reaching out to customers to adopt our Power 100 and Power 100 Green Plus products. We still have members of our community that are not quite aware of these perhaps cheaper and cleaner products. So all of our efforts are aimed at ensuring an enhanced customer experience, increased customer engagement. We're focused on providing customers with clear and more up-to-date insights about our rates and information needed to understand and reduce their bills, while proactively addressing errors in billing to ensure accurate and timely billing. We strive to continue to implement competitive and sustainable rates, as you know, including rate structures and services to meet the needs of our customers and develop new and innovative means of communicating data to support the organization and the communities we serve. And at this time, I'd like to hand it over to Laura Fernandez.
Good afternoon. I'm Laura Fernandez, Senior Director of Regulatory and Legislative Affairs. The Regulatory and Legislative Affairs Department monitors, engages, and influences proceedings, proposed policies, and legislation that directly or indirectly impact Community Power's operations and customers. The department also supports regulatory compliance across multiple state agencies, assists agency-wide understanding of policy impacts, and develops strategies for securing external funding and favorable policy outcomes. Community Power participates in trade associations such as CalCCA and works collaboratively with member agencies, industry partners, and stakeholders across the state to ensure community choice remains a resilient and effective tool for climate action and energy equity. The department's work is guided by the Community Power's board-approved regulatory and legislative platform, which outlines the agency's values-based approach to policy and advocacy, anchored in accelerating deep decarbonization, promoting local development, and stabilizing community choice energy. This year's budget highlights include maintaining staffing levels that allowed for Community Power to monitor or engage with over 60 regulatory proceedings and approximately 150 pieces of legislation, as well as advancing regulatory and legislative outcomes that uphold procurement, programs, and rate-making autonomy to help keep rates down and decision-making local. We're advocating on behalf of our customers every day to help shape the regulatory and legislative landscape to protect local control and promote affordability for all customers. And at this time, I will turn it over to Colin, our Senior Director of Programs.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the committee. Colin Santulli, Director of Customer Energy Programs. I'm going to cover some highlights of our programs department in the budget that will be before you later this month. The First, I'll start with the launching of the San Diego Regional Energy Network, which is a group of programs, 10 programs specifically, focused on energy efficiency with the goal of reducing customer energy use and specifically generating bill savings. We are also expanding our popular solar battery savings pilot into a full-fledged program. The allocation that we're proposing would double the investment made in the pilot, which would support the adoption of solar and storage systems and help reduce community power's resource adequacy requirements, hopefully helping Janine along the way. And really, both those items link to the next item here, which is the launching of our Distributed Energy Resource Management System, which is a mouthful. We call it our DERMS. And that is the centerpiece of our flexible load strategy. And quite simply, this is an effort to make it easier for customers to use energy when it's cheapest. And in the process, it also shifts consumption off of that peak. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Solar Advantage Program, which Janine mentioned in her presentation, but it is incredibly important. We're going to be approving projects that will provide 10,000 customers with a 20% bill reduction. And that's the low-income qualified customers who already are receiving a 30% reduction through the Care Fair program. And lastly, we're doing all of this with, we hope, 14 positions total, which will be in the budget later this month. And nearly half of those are funded through external grants and programs and don't impact the operational budget of the agency. And with that, I'll pass it to Jen.
Thank you so much, Colin, and good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Jen LeBron, and I'm the Director of Public Affairs here at San Diego Community Power. The Public Affairs Department is responsible for connecting our agency with the people and communities we serve, while supporting all of the departments that you've heard from today. Through strategic communications, local partnerships, and public engagement, the team builds awareness of Community Power's mission, programs, and benefits. The department also supports customer education, agency branding, and transparency in all public-facing materials. Together, the marketing and communications, strategic partnerships, and community engagement divisions of the public affairs team foster Community Power's connections with key audiences, enhance brand identity, and ensure transparency through outreach, media engagement, and public education. We also support the Community Advisory Committee and work with the broader team to ensure local priorities are reflected in agency decision-making. Our job ultimately is to make sure that customers and internal staff have the tools they need to understand Community Power's mission and the rates and programs they can use to become more sustainable and save money. All of these efforts and investments fall under the marketing and, they all fall under the marketing and outreach category in your budget. It's a diverse variety of items, and some of those highlights include actually some cost savings by scaling back on printing costs to save hundreds of thousands of dollars year over year and move toward digital delivery. We also are planning to add a strategic communications associate to assist with earned media, so we get that attention in a way that is cost effective for our customers, while also developing more cohesive messaging across programs and services. We also are going to be utilizing the Power Network of community-based organizations that we built out this year to increase trust in communities and work directly with organizations who are already trusted partners in the communities they serve to help spread the word about programs, projects, and rates. And while not reflected directly in the marketing and outreach section of the budget, we are using external funding through the San Diego Regional Energy Network to significantly increase targeted strategic communications and outreach to encourage program participation and increase broad awareness of Community Power and the work that we're doing. All of these efforts on communications, marketing, partnerships, and outreach is done with the goal of providing our customers with accurate, helpful information from a brand that they have seen partner with community stalwarts from local nonprofits, community fairs, and our local sports teams. We also support the Regional Energy Academy in partnership with the Energy Policy Initiative Center, or EPIC, and the San Diego Regional Climate Collaborative to encourage leaders and emerging leaders to learn more about the complexity of the energy markets and Community Power's role in the broader landscape. We want our customers and stakeholders to be familiar with us as we roll out these programs, so they know that we are a legitimate agency that is truly here to help serve them, save them energy, and save them money. I'll turn it over back to Karen.
Next slide, please. All right. Well, a big thank you to all our team members for walking through the details of the proposed budget. This was a big lift, involved a lot of departments and teams, especially public affairs, and has been significantly improved and expanded on over prior years. What you've just heard reflects the expertise of our staff and the values that drive our decision-making. Our fiscal year 2026 proposed budget is more than a financial plan. It's a blueprint for building the clean, equitable, and resilient future that our communities deserve. This budget balances long-term fiscal discipline with near-term action, and it continues our commitment to affordability, equitable programs, and organizational excellence. From strategic energy procurement to program design and community outreach, every dollar in this budget is intentionally directed to maximize value for our customers and ensure sustainability of our operations. As we move forward, we remain committed to listening to our customers, learning from our partners, and delivering on the promise of community power, not just as a utility, but as a force for good in our region. Thank you, and we look forward to answering any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Madam CEO. That was very informative. My head's running numbers.
Madam Chair, there are no public comments.
So, Sandra, do we have any public comment on this item?
There are none, Madam Chair.
There are none. Directors, do you have any comments on the presentation? Any recommendations, questions? They're all here to answer our questions. So, directors?
I just want to say that thank everybody here because that really is heavy lifting. I had a hard time listening to it just because it was serious. And it was, what I mean is it's serious and it matters a lot. Each of your jobs matter. So I really needed to make myself really zone in so that I paid attention and gave it the proper attention it needed. But so each of you were tasked with making sure that your department had what it needed. Is that correct? Thank you. Well, thank you for your work.
Director Nzunza? Can I just show you this? Because I was really reading it. I did. And I talked to, I have like tabs, see? So, as the efforts that you have put into to educate us, you can also see the efforts that I have put in to, to be educated, aside from, the guidance from our CEO and from our CFO and from all of you and listening to, what we need to do. I have some questions though. The external funding, it said, all those external funds for your department comes from SDREN. Madam CEO.
I'll turn that to Colin to answer my question.
Yeah, happy to speak to that, Madam Chair. So we have external funding from a number of sources. The first you mentioned is SDREN. We also have funding that supports the Solar Advantage program, and that's coming through the Public Utilities Commission. We also have funding, and one of the positions that's identified as funded through external funding is coming through the Energy Commission, and that's to support a program called the Equitable Building Decarbonization Program. That will support roughly 2,000 homes being decarbonized throughout the territory, specifically low-income residents as a target. And so we have resources from the state to help get the word out about those renovations.
So when we see an asterisk that says position will be externally funded in FY26, those are funded from several sources. Okay. Now going back to Tim, sorry, Tim. I got here, bro. You said that we have, we have separated from the operations with our CIPs, and we also have our investment plan that is delivered for 5 years. and those are the 14 specific programs that were here. Are those allocated funds already, or like, for example, we have hold on a second, sorry about that, I have it here. One program that says for small businesses, right? That is the CDFA Healthy Refrigerator Grant for small businesses. Is that fund 690 funded or allocated funds already from the budget?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Chair. Speaking specifically about the CDFA grant, the board took an action, I think it was in January of this year, to appropriate those CDFA funds. So when that appropriation action happened in January, the board effectively added those funds into the budget. So it's a long way of me saying, yeah, when the board took that action, then those funds were allocated. They're reflected there because when they're added to the CIP is considered what we call a continuing fund. Continuing meaning that whatever is appropriated in prior periods continues on in future periods. And the general idea is, and I could geek out about this all day, with those CIP projects, they're one-time projects that are intended to be multiple years. And so as opposed to like an annual budget where whatever you don't use, that money goes back into your general fund. Just like you have in your jurisdictions, that CDFA fund is continuing, and it's project funds that will continue until that project ends. So then once that happens, then it'll be closed out.
So now when that's being planned and being strategized, Jen is working out there to put it out to our business community, because this is really good. Programs that we have here are really, I'm reading it and I said, we have that, and this is something that educate us also to bring forth to our community that we serve. And most of these programs and projects, CIP programs and projects, and even our capital investment plan are really, thank you, Karen. I learn, thank you. I learn as we go, to serve our community. I have one question to our CFO with regards to our net fiscal, what do you call this? Our 164 net
position.
right there. Okay, here, yes. So it says here we can only put it just to 3 reserve funds, right? According to the book, I read that. It's programs, what's the other one? Programs, CIP, and it's.
If I may, Madam Chair.
Yes,
I can assist
help
you.
me, yes.
And-
I'm looking for it.
Yes, please. That's in alignment with our reserve policy. So that
Yes.
reserve policy speaks to the distribution of excess reserves.
Yes,
So that policy speaks to building our reserve as we approach our reserve target, number one. Number two, it speaks to distributing those excess reserves to support programs. And thirdly, allocation of excess reserves to build a reserve stabilization fund.
that's.
I think that's the one. yes.
Okay, thank you. So
Sure.
according to this budget, we have reached 180 days. And we have this net position of 164. Is that something that we can put towards the the stabilization reserve fund?
Yes, Madam Chair, that would be in direct compliance with our reserve policy. I would just like to point out, as we've continued on that reserve trajectory, in certain periods throughout the year, our reserves, so it has historically ebbed and flowed where we support operations from reserves. But year over year, where we land in terms of that reserve trajectory continues to grow. So we do anticipate hitting that 180 days cash on hand, the reserve target in this fiscal period. Although the strategic plan points to date and time in 2027, we believe we may hit that earlier than planned. However, there might be a period where we may dip below that, depending on where we are in the where we are in the fiscal cycle. But the intent is to, once we stabilize that 180 days cash on hand, or as time provides, for us to reallocate some of those excess reserves into the reserve stabilization plan.
Thank you for that clarification, Dr. Washington. So, you know, I mean, as we know, this is a living document, and you come to us when, as we are nimble, a nimble organization, that when you see that we are at that stage, that you will come back and say, it's time for us to fund the stabilization reserve.
Yes, Madam Chair, that
Thank
would
you.
certainly be the case. And again, that would be in alignment with the reserve.
Yeah.
policy.
Thank you so much. You know, I mean, this will also, as I look at the policy of how we distribute our reserves, you know, I mean, this are really very well thought of, for, you know, I mean, for establishing this policy. The stabilization reserve, you know, just for it to be recorded, mitigates financial and cost energy risk due to cyclical costs of energy fluctuations and rate shocks, and may maintain compliance with financial covenants. So, you know, I mean, I look forward and hope and pray that we can, you know, I mean, reach that stage, Dr. Washington, Madam CEO, and then, you know, I mean, we'll be excited to hear your recommendation when that time comes. Thank you so much. So are there any more comments? If not, I would entertain a motion. Oh, let me read it. Recommendation. Recommend board approval of resolution number 25-06, adopting the FY 25-26 operating budget, FY 25-26 capital budget, and FY 26 to 2030 capital investment plan.
So moved.
Thank you. I have a motion from Director Suzuki. I have a second from Director Inzunza. If there are no more questions or comments, Madam Secretary, please call the vote.
Director Insunza?
Yes.
Vice Chair Suzuki?
Aye.
Chair Giamani?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Yoo-hoo! All right, we'll now go to item number 7, recommend board adoption of resolution number 25-07, authorizing execution of an energy prepayment transaction related documents in form of documents subject to maximum issuance amount, limitation on fees, and minimum required savings. I'll turn this over to Dr. Eric Washington, Chief Financial Officer, and Jeb Spengler, Strategic Finance Manager, to present this item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, for the record, Dr. Eric Washington, Chief Financial Officer at San Diego Community Power. I believe our municipal financial advisor is also virtually online with us, Michael Berwanger. So this item is an item that really excites the finance team and a direct contribution to our affordability factor. And we have an opportunity to do several of these transactions in year to come. Really excited to have Jeb Spengler, our strategic finance manager, who is a subject matter expert, having come from the municipal financial advisor side of these transactions. He's really knowledgeable about these transactions, in conjunction with our municipal financial advisor, Michael Berwanger, who's online with us today. So really excited to present this item. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jeb Spengler.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Jeb Spengler, the Strategic Finance Manager for San Diego Community Power. Happy to be here and presenting to you all a complex topic this late in the day of the FRMC meeting. So bear with me and let me know if you have any questions. What is our goal of the prepay program? And it's ultimately to address affordability and lower energy costs. The goal through this upcoming prepayment transaction would be to lower energy costs by up to in excess of 8% on existing power purchase contracts that we have, specifically the VAMO contract that was passed by the board last month. How do we do this? We do it through leveraging the ability to issue tax exempt bonds.
And just by way of background, the ability to issue tax-exempt bonds for these prepaid transactions was codified in U.S. law. They've been around since the early 1990s. Largely, they've been done for natural gas transactions in the Midwest and Southeast. As early as, I think it was 2005, it was the National Energy Policy Act allowed for energy prepayments outside of natural gas specifically. And since then, California community choice aggregators have sold up to 20 issues over totaling $18 billion of debt outstanding. As you may recall, SDCP, through the California Community Choice Financing Authority, sold its first prepaid transaction in 2024, November 2024. Next slide, please. So there are, as I mentioned, these are complex, large transactions. There are a number of parties involved. The transaction that we're bringing forward with you today actually contains, for the most part, all of the same exact parties. This is considered basically a follow-on transaction to our 2024 F series. And just to kind of walk through these, because I'll mention, maybe I'll say the word prepaid supplier or bond underwriter, and this will give you a better idea of who these people are and how they kind of fall into the transaction. So the prepaid supplier and the bond underwriter in this transaction is Morgan Stanley. That's similar to what we used in 2024. The funding recipient counterparty is one way of kind of diversifying what we sell to the investors by the transaction not pointing to Morgan Stanley, because they would have basically 20 some odd or more prepayment transactions in the market. Investors like diversification. So there's a separate funding recipient counterparty. In the 2024 transaction, that funding recipient was Pacific Life Insurance. It's likely to be another financial institution for the 2025, but probably not Pacific Life Insurance. As Eric mentioned, our municipal financial advisor and swap advisor is PFM. Mike Berwanger is on the phone. My phone a friend if I have any questions. There are several sets of attorneys on this transaction: bond counsel and tax counsel. They basically sign off on our ability to work through CCCFA to issue tax-exempt bonds on the transaction. Chapman and Cutler is our specific disclosure counsel. They help us with the disclosure document, which is Appendix A, which is in your board packets. The Appendix A is basically a nuts to bolts of disclosure on San Diego Community Power. It's actually a really heavily detailed document about kind of our financial position, our programs, our energy portfolio supply. It's actually quite useful document for people if you just want a little A to Z of SDCP. The bond issuer in this is a conduit issuer. It's California Community Choice Financing Authority. Through our issuance in 2024 F, we became members of CCCFA. The use of a bond issuer is to basically divorce the energy supplier, in this case, CCCFA. We actually purchased power from CCCFA in this transaction. So by us issuing this tax-exempt authority, there's tax reasons why we have to go through this JPA, which is CCCFA. The custodian is US Bank. They basically manage all the flows of funds from the various parties, including ourselves. The commodity swap counterparty is Royal Bank of Canada, also known as RBC. They provide, because energy payments are variable and the bond payments are fixed, there's basically a commodity swap in place that basically levelizes those payments. And finally, the last two are just credit opinions. One is the credit rating agency Moody's. I may have also heard of Moody's, S&P, and Fitch. The transaction in 24 used Moody's. And finally, the green bond opinion, which basically tells investors that these are highly green, which is basically sustainable investments for their portfolio. A lot of investors specifically look for green bonds to put into their investment portfolio, and Kestrel is the provider for that. Next slide, please. So why do we do this? Ultimately, in the era of affordability, we look to achieve at least $4.5 million in average annual savings. That's basically the base minimum that we would accept to even move forward with a transaction. That's essentially the 8% target that we talk about in a few documents, as particularly the bond resolution. 8%, we target kind of double-digit savings, hopefully 10% or more. The first transaction was closer to 12%. So, our goal is to achieve in excess of $4.5 to $5 million in annual savings through at least the initial term of the bond issue. By way of background, the 2024 transaction, we saved $53.2 million in total savings, which is $6.9 million annually. I just went back and looked, and we've saved a little over $2 million just since January of this year, which is about $400,000 a month, which is real savings. How does this work? Again, just by kind of a quick example background. CCCFA, SDCP through CCCFA issues tax-exempt bonds at a tax-exempt rate, in this case, somewhere around 4.25%. We basically send these bond proceeds, in this case, it's about $1 billion, to a taxable entity, which basically provides this taxable entity an alternate source of capital. And so this taxable source of their funding rate would be about 5%. So when you translate that into $1 billion of energy, it translates into about $40 million in bond payments, which is less than $45 million of what we're paying for PPA. So that's kind of where the $4.5 million in savings comes from. Finally, this debt is non-recourse to SDCP. The bonds are not secured or guaranteed by San Diego Community Power. It doesn't impact our balance sheet, and it doesn't impact our debt metric, which, as Dr. Eric Washington showed earlier, is we have no debt. It will continue to be zero even after this issue, as it was after the 2024S. And then finally, established precedent with over 20 CCAs having sold prepaid deals since 2019, and we have a slide a little later on so you can see that list. Next slide, please. So this being the FRMC, wanted to provide just an overview of some of the potential risks and how we, through our municipal advisor, we mitigate those risks. In almost all certain circumstances, if the transaction terminates for whatever reason, ultimately the bonds do get paid off, and the PPAs that we assign or the VAMO contract that we assign into this prepay just reverts back to us, and essentially we lose the savings. Like, so if we were going to get 8% savings on the VAMO volume that we assign in, we just basically go back to square one and we go back to paying the contract as it stands. There is an opportunity cost and lost staff time. I was essentially hired to do a lot of these transactions, so there is my time spent. It is all hands on deck type of transaction. I really have to coordinate with all departments and all of my colleagues here. We have several team chats going with basically who does what and when. So there is not just my time, but there is ultimately a lot of other staff time that goes into this. It's a large undertaking. For out-of-pocket costs, there's only two costs that are actually not contingent on a successful bond sale. That's the Kestrel Green Bond rating. That's an engagement that we do in advance of the bond sale, as well as the rating agency fee, which we have not gone through that process yet. But that is a fee that is not contingent on a successful sale. If we go to the rating agencies, we would have to pay for that. Market timing risks. The market has been in a place where prepay bonds don't actually work or haven't worked for the last 4 or 5 months. The way we mitigate market timing risks is we just be ready to go when the market produces favorable conditions. Under the board resolution, we set certain parameters as to when we would actually sell bonds. The primary parameter being minimum savings. We wouldn't move forward unless we hit a minimum savings target. I will just mention that there was a transaction that successfully sold this week, it being the first one since January of this year. So the market has reopened. So kind of, not that we've timed this, but it has kind of worked itself out that we've timed this perfectly. Hopefully the market continues to stay open for the next month or 2 months, so we can take advantage of where it's at currently. Just if for whatever reason we lose load or we have difficulties assigning contracts into this prepaid transaction, is ultimately mitigated because we have a very large portfolio of volume. We have a number of PPA contracts coming online. This particular contract, we're going to be using the VAMO that we, again, just board approved last month. We have enough VAMO volume to actually last us through the initial period of this bond if we absolutely need to. So there's really no risk of us not being able to assign in enough energy into this contract. And then finally, just tax and regulatory risk with whatever happens at the federal level. If for whatever reason there is a loss of tax exemption, because that was an issue that I believe Patrick discussed over at the last board meeting. If we were to lose the ability to sell tax exempt bonds, this ability to do prepay bonds would go away. Next slide, please. I won't go too much into this. Oops, sorry. This is the risk mitigants of bond pricing activities. As I mentioned, it's a $1 billion bond transaction, and the prepay supplier, which is Morgan Stanley in this situation, there's a number of fees that they receive through the sale of the debt, through the structuring of the energy contracts on their side, remarketing fees of electricity that we provide to them through the VAMO. There's future structuring and underwriting fees when we hit the period where these bonds need to be remarketed, and then just overall funding costs. And for all of that, we have our municipal financial advisor, PFM, who's also on the line. They are our fiduciary with that respect and undertake on our behalf. They make sure that all of the fees that Morgan Stanley is charging for this transaction are fair and reasonable. In addition, we have gone through a solicitation process for essentially all of the service providers that were both part of the 2024 transaction, as well as for this one as a follow-on transaction. And any future transactions will come back to the board for additional solicitation and approvals. Next slide, please. This is a list of the 20 CCA transactions that have occurred since 2019. The one that I don't have on here currently is the Marin Clean Energy deal that just priced on Monday. We are aware of at least one additional transaction that is likely coming to the CCCFA board the same time as us. So we're likely going to be in the market with at least one other transaction, assuming approval. And then we have heard of rumblings of several others that are on the docket for the next couple of months. So there's going to be a somewhat heavy slate of clean bond issuance over the next 2 to 3 months. Next slide, please. This is the prepayment timeline. I crossed off the first two. The board approved the VAMO, which we'll be using as basically the PPA for this particular prepay transaction. Just yesterday, we had kind of a multifaceted interview with Kestrel Green Bond verifiers. They basically have they've confirmed that our bonds are very green. They have a new scale which will dictate exactly how green, but we are about as green as you can get with respect to what's being in this portfolio, which is essentially all solar. But there was a heavy focus on programs. They love the programs that we do, and the report that is included in the investor document will have a nice summary of all the aspects that they consider green and sustainable from their perspective. We're here today for the FRMC, and we would hope to present this at the board on June 26th. If it is approved through the board, we would anticipate potentially pricing as early as July 8th or sometime shortly thereafter, depending on market conditions. Typically, bonds close about 2 weeks after the pricing date, so that would have us middle to end of July. And then there's usually a little lag between the bond closing and when the energy flows and our savings start. And assuming the July timing, we would start seeing savings on this transaction as early as September. Next slide, I think that is it. That concludes my communication.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation.
There are no public comments, Madam
There
Chair.
are no public comments. Thank you so much for Mr. Spangler.
Yes.
Thank you. I wrote it down.
Just think Ghostbusters. Everybody thinks Ghostbusters.
Senior moment sometimes, you know. Okay, so, no public comment. Are there any member of the committee to comment? No comment. I do.
Okay.
For Dr. Washington. As Mr. Spangler had said, that this is a deep dive, effort for us. Maybe it would be also an opportune time for the directors to be, most especially the new ones, to be briefed better on this subject with regards to prepayment. You have with me and Director Coloma, who are, we had presented this to us before, but I believe that before we go to the presentation to the board, that the other board members, maybe 2 by 2 or however, Madam CEO, they would be briefed with regards to the processes that Mr. Spangler had presented. It's very exciting to understand that we're going to have at least a savings of 8%, but we also have to, time is of the essence because of HR1, right? And so the more educated we are about this, the better we can help, our organization to move it as quickly as we can. So once it's adopted, they cannot take it away anymore.
I don't know that.
I don't know, because there are a lot, right, that you presented. There were a lot of CCAs that have been
Yes.
taking advantage of this program.
Yes.
So we also need to take advantage of this program. But of course, with the new members seated in this dais, I would request that our CEO and our CFO would really brief our directors. Thank you, Mr. Spangler. Thank you, Dr. Washington. This is board. This is a recommendation for adoption of resolution number 2507, approving parameters under which an energy prepayment transaction can be completed, authorizing and approving documents or form of documents supporting the prepaid transaction, and directing California Community Choice Financing Authority, CCCFA, to make payments to service providers for issuance costs from prepaid bond proceeds. I am entertaining a motion.
So moved.
I have a motion. I have a second. If there are no other comments, Madam Secretary, please call the vote.
Director Insunza,
Yes.
Vice Chair Suzuki,
Aye.
Chair Yamani.
Aye.
Motion carries, Madam Chair.
Motion carries. Are there any committee member announcements? No. There any directors or CFO, CEO, COO, any, no more? Any other? I'm asking. That brings us to the end of our agenda. I appreciate everyone's participation today. Since we will be dark in July, the next regular FMRC meeting will be held on Thursday, August 21st, 2025 at 3 p.m. And don't forget our meeting on June 26th here at 5 p.m. Thank you all so very much. Thank you, directors. Thank you, staff. Thank you for your guidance and your patience to educating the board and making us understand everything. Is there anything, Ruby? No. Okay. This meeting is adjourned. I have it. Thank you so much.